Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. The last couple weeks for crypto have been insanely volatile paired with the breakout of the stock market. For today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the bullish and bearish case for Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto markets. We're going to be taking a look at the exact things that I'm watching for to dictate when confirmation is both bearish and bullish so that we can ultimately go about profiting off of the coming volatility that I am expecting. The charts are telling me that now is the time to be paying attention. So I'm going to be breaking down exactly what I think you guys should be watching for, so stay all the way to the end so you do not miss out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Now, as we're getting into this chart for Bitcoin, I think now is a very, very important time that we need to be paying attention. Now, a couple factors that we're considering here. Remember that the reason why Bitcoin is breaking out is because we had this, and I really don't want to say Bitcoin is breaking out because Bitcoin hasn't broken out. It's still technically in a short-term downtrend. But I will say the reason why we saw the bounce in Bitcoin is because the stock market had this small breakout in the shorter time frame. So we've been watching for the stock market to more or less make a move into new all-time highs and break the prior high here at about 4,800. And I do believe that that's what's coming next. We made this rise and we're currently sitting at our first major resistance in the shorter time frames. So if we're going to see a pullback here, don't be surprised. You know, we could see a pullback all the way back down to 44.50. And if that's the case, we're going to expect to see Bitcoin pull back even further. In my last update, we were right here and we were just barely breaking out from the news that Grayscale actually won their lawsuit against the SEC. And I told you guys that most likely we were going to be coming back down to retest the prior breakout point, and then that was going to be dictating whether we were going to hold the support and whether we get continuation or whether we break back down and actually go to the downside. And so that's why I say that now is an important time to be paying attention. We saw the downside that I was expecting, we're seeing the pullback, and as it stands, we're just about to hit that first high inside of that move, right? So if we're going to see this be continuation, what we more or less want this to be is some type of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The problem with this is our wave 1 and our wave 3 are a little bit funky, mainly because this wave 4 correction is coming and touching the prior high. It's still possible in Elliott waves. The 4 wave can come down and touch the top of wave 1. It happens all the time. But the more that happens, the weaker that the setup gets. So what we would have wanted to see was the market actually hold support up here and then get continuation instead of having the next lower low back down to this high. It doesn't necessarily mean that the setup is failed by any means, because we can still come in here, hold this prior high, and as long as we're sitting roughly above this high and we're not closing below, then at that point we're going to be looking for some type of continuation. The problem that I'm seeing right now is just because the breakout that we saw right here was really enhanced because of the Grayscale lawsuit, right? We had all of this news come out where Grayscale won their lawsuit, so we instantly saw a big breakout from that. Generally, when we have these news events that come out and they trigger the price to move in a certain way, generally speaking, they're not to be trusted. And so it's always the saying, buy the rumor, sell the news. So if there was ever news of them winning this lawsuit, you're buying before any of the news comes out, right? It's the rumor. Maybe this is real, maybe this isn't. This is a narrative I'm going to. And then, you know, eventually something comes out to fuel narratives, and then that's kind of why we see markets break out. Now, the problem with this comes in the fact that everybody sells the news, right? Everybody that was buying the rumor, awaiting any sort of news, the second that the news comes out and sends the price up, we see all of those people begin to sell. Now, the thing about this is all we really ended up doing was coming and retesting the prior mid-range, right? So when we're looking at this, we have a few different areas of demand on the chart. We have this 25K level, which we've talked extensively about. We have the 25K level as support. Up to this point, we retested that level and we've currently held it as support. And after that, we ended up seeing this kind of buyback. The problem with the buyback comes in the fact that it was a news event breakout. With that being said, you can't trust it as much. So if this is to lose the entirety of this candle and we're to close all the way back down roughly to the same support we were at that point, I personally would believe that we were most likely going for a lower low, right? We would probably come back here and then make a quick drop all the way back down to this 618 level. That's, to me, the most important area on this chart is the 618. If we lose the 25K level, I think that it's pretty much a straight drop to the 618. And then, we could even see a lower sell-off just depending on the way that the market, reacts. Because of the fact I've been drawing the S&P 500 actually going into new all-time highs, I'm not anticipating Bitcoin. So let me rephrase this. If the S&P 500 continues to break out and we finally get above those prior all-time highs like I've been drawing, then at that point, I'm not really expecting Bitcoin's going to need to come all the way down to the 786 or even the 88.3. I think that this 618 being 21,344 would be enough for us to get a buyback and then for us to actually continue on in the cycle. Yes, if we lose 25K, and I did talk about how that would most likely signal a big drop all the way down to this 18.2 level, I wanted to just mention the fact that the problem with that comes in the S&P 500. If the S&P 500 is bullish and we're going to see this continue to go up, I don't believe Bitcoin's going to have quite that big of a sell-off because, Bitcoin's ultimately bullish when the S&P 500 goes up. So any sort of sell-off here will most likely be completed during this initial move. It's not going to take a much longer amount of time considering our last line of defense is really 25K. This has been support for so long that if we lose this, it's going to be a really quick and sudden sell-off. And because it would be so fast, we could see a really big liquidation event that could come all the way back down and actually go below the 618. And that could happen all in one big move, kind of how this one did, right? Where we had this little support level down in here. And then once we started selling off, we just had this big capitulation right below that. This would be a little bit more similar to a 618 retest, which is why it would look a little bit more like this. But don't be caught off guard if we see a little bit more downside and we maybe go all the way back down and have one more final fake out to these levels. We don't ever know exactly how it's going to go. But the one thing that I am watching for, at least in the short term, for confirmation is kind of just hovering around the level that we're consolidating on. Either this is an ABC correction and we're going to get continuation. To me, that idea looks a little bit weaker. What I'm seeing right now in the shorter time frames, to me, it looks a little bit more like an ABC up, right? An ABC up, straight back into prior resistance. The problem with this entire move is we're closing back below the mid-range point. So not only have we made a lower low, we made another correction back up to retest some of these prior resistance levels. Except, I should say prior support levels, except now they're acting as resistance, right? This is a sell-off coming after a lower low, after a rejection on prior support, now acting as new resistance. So as it stands, the market is bearish in the short term. We're still closing below descending resistance. We're closing below horizontal support and resistance. We're closing below horizontal resistance. So we got to keep in mind that now is a little bit of a risky time. We really don't want to be jumping into long opportunities or anything right now. Even though we're retesting the prior high, I don't necessarily think that that's any sort of confirmation to jump into long positions. We have no idea if this trend's even going to bounce. You're betting on a negative trend by trying to buy right now inside of Bitcoin because we did just make a big lower low and we are getting rejected once again. We got to wait for some sort of confirmation. I think that when we look at things like Ethereum, that gives us a little bit of an idea as far as what is happening inside of crypto. Because when I see Ethereum, to me it actually looks a little bit more bullish than Bitcoin does. So let's remove our drawing tools and let's come in here. So when I'm looking at Ethereum, I see a really solid Elliott wave count. I see 5 waves up right here, right? Wave 5 peak just above the top of 2,000 at that resistance. Now, what we're seeing here is actually our first ABC correction, and I don't believe that we're done. This was wave A, this was wave A, this was wave B, and now I believe we're working on wave C right now. If we come down here and draw the 618 fib, we're looking at, well, we actually already retested the 618 right here. But when we're looking at in terms of Bitcoin, Bitcoin hasn't, right? Bitcoin's still sitting, pretty high up in its consolidation. So altcoins will generally drag a little bit lower than Bitcoin. They'll make this final lower low. This will probably go all the way down to either the midpoint of the 618 or even come down to retest that 786 before this correction is over. What I'm seeing with Ethereum is a little bit easier to see Elliott waves. And up to this point, kind of all we've really had is either a finished wave 3 or maybe we're not even done completely with wave 3 and we still have one more. To me, this is a wave 4 correction, and if we have one more low coming, this will complete a 5 wave down. And then that will kind of complete this first impulse for ETH. Keep in mind, guys, that when we're looking at this, ETH, long term, is still in a big ascending triangle. So even if we come back down and retest the support, it's still just going to be ascending support, right? So we can spend all of this time kind of contracting inside of this triangle before it ever breaks out. And what it reminds me of, sorry guys, I'm losing my voice. What it reminds me of a lot is actually early day Bitcoin, because early day Bitcoin, if we come over here, it had kind of a similar ascending triangle breakout. We broke out, and then we just consolidated here on this ascending support for a long period of time, right? There was a long period of consolidation that we spent right here. And this is one of those ascending triangles that coiled all the way to the apex of the triangle, right? Let's count how many reactions. We have 1, we have 2, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, there's at least 7 different reactions inside of this, and you could actually draw more if you're counting that one there. So what we see inside of Ethereum today is the same pattern. It's just kind of happening in its own unique way. This is a much longer period of consolidation. So even if we make one more lower low, which to me, when I'm looking at ETH, I do believe ETH is going to make a lower low. And when I see ETH looking like it's going to make a lower low, I'm leaning towards the fact that I believe Bitcoin is most likely going to end up doing the same thing. You know, Bitcoin looks a little bit more bullish than all of them. I could see Bitcoin kind of consolidate here for longer, even though ETH and altcoins would make a lower low. But the problem that I'm seeing right here comes in the fact that the SPX is sitting at our first resistance, like I said. We're looking at the potential of our first pullback here. If this pulls back, I'm worried that that's going to be a big enough sell-off that we're going to end up seeing Bitcoin, you know, maybe make a decent sized pullback here. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to say with Bitcoin, but with Bitcoin, it looks like this. Our Elliott wave count is pretty much the same as ETH. What we've seen up to this point is a pretty clear 5 waves up. Now, where it gets a little bit tricky was this most recent move back up into resistance at 32K. What I think that we're seeing here is the potential of this actually being a B wave that made a new high, which sometimes happens. It's called an expanded flat correction. And what we're waiting for is one more final C wave back down, right? So with Bitcoin, we're looking at a retest of, you know, 21,350, I believe is the 618. If that's where we're to go. Yeah, so the 618 would be 21,400. Let's just give her that number. So if we end up seeing a lower low for Bitcoin, this thing could get pretty volatile here. If we lose this, we come back down, we're consolidating back down on this prior level. To me, that's going to signal a breakdown, and we're probably going to see a pretty quick one at that. And then that should be enough that we could complete this correction. What I see for ETH is really just one more low, and then it's done. From there, we're going to be back on ascending support. From there, I would expect that, you know, we might spend a little bit of consolidation before going up. But what we're looking at here is just a long-term accumulation, guys. We could be here for a long time. We know that based off of how long we spent inside of the last bottom formation. We got to remember that we just have to be prepared for more or less 2024 and not to be seeing the real blow off top until 2025. If we're following a normal 4-year cycle, we still have a couple years, guys. We still have a lot of time left. So we just have to exercise patience in these times. As you guys can tell, in our last bear market, from peak low to the following COVID capitulation was 457 days. And then from the point of us actually breaking out of the range highs and then consolidating on them as support, which happened right here, that was all the way probably closer to 600 or 700 days. Yeah, so about 650 days worth of consolidation from the peak low of the bear market all the way to the point of us actually flipping those and going in price discovery. Now, what I find interesting, guys, we got to keep in mind, Ethereum in the last cycle bottomed at the end of the year. This cycle bottomed in June of last year. So we're seeing something different, right? We're seeing something a little bit different. So far, the amount of time that we've spent inside of here from the peak low, we're currently at about 437. So remember, guys, it was 457 days that we got the very next peak low of that cycle. So it wouldn't surprise me to see this kind of final low come in here. We go back down onto this ascending trend line that we've had since we began the bear market capitulation here in June of 2022. I wouldn't be surprised if we come back down here, finish this B wave, or C wave, I should say, ABC down, consolidate onto support, and then from there, you know, maybe we get the breakout, maybe we don't. Maybe we do this. We come hit the resistance again, and then come back down and do some more consolidation Guys, this time over here, April, May, June of 2024, that's going to be our Bitcoin halving. So don't be surprised if ETH and all of our cryptocurrencies spend all of this time just more or less ranging sideways in a similar sort of way as this. Obviously, this was a double bottom formation, right? This was a double bottom and then a breakout, whereas this is going to be an ascending triangle. So we're seeing a little bit of a difference, but at the same time, this is going to be 450 days approximately to the point that we're actually bottoming here over at this ascending support. So that would put us at the exact same time that we saw from peak low to our secondary capitulation over here in our last bear market. And then remember guys, it was 650 days from the point of us actually flipping the range highs to support going into that new cycle. So if we're looking at 650 days, so we're pretty much sitting here looking at April, May, June as the point where we're going to be breaking back out again, which coincidentally coincides perfectly with our next Bitcoin halving. If I draw where we had our Bitcoin halving in the last cycle, we had it was May like 10th or something. So our Bitcoin halving happened right here. That was right after we finished the secondary capitulation and we were just barely beginning that kind of blow off top type of move, right? So if we're looking at a similar sort of thing, our Bitcoin halving is projected to be April of 2024. So April of 2024 is right here. So at some point over here, that's when we're looking to have our Bitcoin halving. So don't be surprised if, we have this final capitulation that takes place at the end of this year, over the next couple months. I don't know how long it's going to take. I really have no idea. That takes us to a retest of this ascending support. And then from there, we have a similar sort of move like this. Maybe we were even able to break out after that. I don't know. Maybe we finally flip this move, do something like that here, and then that turns into support leading into our halving, kind of in a similar way that it did over in here. Halving, then we broke out, flipped the range highs to support, and then that's kind of where we went into price discovery. We don't know how the cycle is going to end up. All we can go off of is what we see right now and the time itself. And right now, the time itself is leaning to be the exact same all the way through, comparing it to the last cycle. So seeing one more low, getting us even closer to those same time frames over in here, we're literally going to be looking at, the end of this consolidation and the beginning of our first major breakouts going into this cycle. So far, to me, it looks a lot like the last cycle. There's just a little bit of a difference inside of the current consolidation pattern. But I mean, as I see it, it's the same. I know that you guys are going to be able to see the same thing. So now I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about. I do see the potential of one more low here when I'm talking about Bitcoin. I really do see that. It all kind of coincides with what happens at support right here, but it's looking a little bit weak in here. The SPX itself looks like it's going to pull back. Like I said, when we're looking at the dollar index is getting a nice buyback, so that's not what we really want to see. Now, we have a couple resistance levels. We have the one up here at about 105.8, and I really won't be surprised if we end up coming back up to tag this before the dollar's done impulsing, right? Because we've kind of been consolidating. We've been in a downtrend for a little while now, but now the problem kind of comes in the fact where it looks like we're at the point of breaking out. We've broken out of the descending resistance. This looks like a potential retest. And so if that's the case, it's hard to say how big this next leg up can get. If we're to see this end up being a bigger retest, this come all the way up here, even flip this mid-range and go in for a new high, we could actually end up seeing this be kind of a really big capitulation. I still believe that this is going to be a lower high before we see lower lows coming, but we got to remember that what this it could end up actually being is a big A, B, and a C. We see this happen many times with impulsing markets, or what I should say, the beginning of a bear market, where we'll have the initial run down to the downside, where we'll have the initial sell-off to the downside, and then we get this final lower high that comes in before we kind of continue on in that bearish trend. We saw the same thing happen for Bitcoin in 2017. It was the exact same kind of lower high setup where we made the blow off top, we made this big kind of sell off back down, then we made another run up, and this is where everybody was expecting we'd go into a new high, and then that's just what kind of continued on into the downtrend. So we got to keep these things in mind when we're talking about this. Inside of a lower high for the dollar, this thing can get a little bit more impulsive than people think. What I would love to see is for us to never go above 105.8. That would be the greatest scenario, where it ends up doing something like this, just a smaller ABC type of correction. I'm not even going to draw it as an ABC. This would just end up being some type of consolidation here before a much bigger move that would target about 95 all the way back down to here. And then from there, we would expect another bounce of some kind. So we're looking at the dollar to give us an idea of what is happening with crypto. And the dollar, although still below resistance, at least horizontal resistance, we are kind of flipping this descending resistance as a potential of support. I would love to see this lose it and then that be deviation before we go back down. Or at the worst case scenario, we come back up and make a new high. But if we ever get above this 105.8, that's really where we're going to see a big low for crypto. It's hard to say what the stock market does with that because the stock market to me looks bullish. So I'm kind of watching for this to end up topping out relatively soon. But we don't know. As of right now, with us being so close on that descending resistance, it's really anybody's best guess whether this is a bull trap or whether this breaks out. The problem that I'm seeing around Bitcoin comes in the shorter time frames, it's looking a little bit weak. We have made 2 lower lows. We're still below descending resistance. We have closed below our prior mid-range point, being right here. So there's nothing that's really, giving us any sort of big inclination of what's happening. But what I can say is if the dollar breaks out here and we go to another high, Bitcoin's making a lower low. ETH is making a lower low. The stock market's going to pull back. And then, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how everything holds from there. Because if Bitcoin loses this 25K level, I do believe that we're going to the 618, which from right now where we're at today, that's about a 20% drop. So that'd be a pretty gnarly move. I think from the high of the move down to, so we basically be going through 20% drops. That's generally what we're going to see the whole way up in this new cycle. As Bitcoin uptrends, we're going to see these big pullbacks. Some of them will be 20%. A lot of them, I think, will be around that price point. Up to this point, every single one of our pullbacks have been relatively the same. This one was 11%. This one was 24 or 22%. This one was 20%. So, almost every single one of our pullbacks have basically been about 20%. So to see us have another one of those would be pretty consistent. The only problem is this would be having back-to-back 20% drops, and it would just be completing our first impulse here. Don't be surprised if this ends up being a wave B, and then we go in for one more final wave C, which if that's the case, we'd be looking at an Elliott wave count of something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. That would be probably an extended wave 5, and it could get very, very volatile on our way back down to retesting some of these levels. And keep in mind that if we see this happen for Bitcoin, it's hard to say where the SPX goes. To me, I still am really bullish on the SPX, so I would like us to actually hold support down in here. But if the SPX goes in for a longer term correction, then crypto's going to do the exact same thing. The only thing that gives me real hope is the fact that ETH, to me, looks better than Bitcoin. It held support earlier, never made a lower low in the bear market like Bitcoin did at the end of the year. And now the Elliott waves are even more consistent, easier to read than Bitcoin. So for me, I really am liking ETH right here. Even if ETH makes a lower low, to me, that's what's giving me a little bit of a better idea of what Bitcoin's going to do, because I'm going to be kind of watching for ETH to be bottoming down in here. And I think that whenever ETH kind of hits down at about $1,400, that's probably going to be around the same point that Bitcoin is going to bottom, wherever that is for Bitcoin. And I don't know for sure. But this is kind of what I'm seeing, so I wanted to give you guys this update. If you guys found value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys want to join the Discord server, follow any of the trades that I post over this cycle, you guys can do so by following the links in the description. You guys can see everything that I have there, any social media. You guys can reach out to me however you want, ask questions. I'd love to hear from you guys. But yeah, guys, thank you all so much for watching. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.